This is not an anti-vaccination video. I am very glad that people who want vaccines can get vaccines. I am vaccinated, and I will go back for my booster shot. But at the place where I got vaccinated, there was enforced lack of social distance. There was a guy in an official-looking vest constantly telling people to push up the line to reduce the space in order to move the line faster, as if less social distance means a faster line. Maybe he had some other purpose. I don't know. Let's speculate. Meanwhile, there were people trying to sell pens and other things, repeatedly harassing every single person in the line to try to sell those pens. And those people, some of them had their noses out. And it was hard not to be touched by them, as it was hard not to be touched by people in the line when the line would get compressed again. People in front of me had their noses out. People in back of me had their noses out. And at one point, we were put past an open cafe that had a dining area on the outside, and the dining area was right next to our line, and there was no plexiglass or other things separating us from those people who were eating and drinking. Then when our identification information was checked, our temperatures were not checked, and after that we were put through an alternating series of metal barricades, like kind of police barricades, which was the pure opposite of social distance. Calling it a line ignores the fact that while you're in the middle of that section of line, you're not even in a linear formation. You're basically in a crowd of people where there's some metal in between you and some other part of the crowd. At the end of that, we were put into seats which were close enough together that somebody in an adjacent seat could easily reach out and touch you. And we waited there while I watched people in what appeared to be medical gear, nonetheless casually touching each other with bare hands a lot. And the whole process took over an hour, which otherwise I wouldn't be bothered by it. But considering all the other risks involved, it seemed like it was a lot of time to be exposed, especially during the indoor part. But I did get my vaccine. So why am I mentioning all these complaints about the vaccination site, even though I'm probably going to go back? Well, because things that are dangerous for a year and a half don't become safe just because you're standing in line for a vaccine. The vaccine, even if it works perfectly, isn't really going to offer you much protection if you have already, been exposed to COVID, especially, if it's been an hour. Maybe it would. I don't know. It seems like it's a bad plan. And in some parts of the process, it seemed like it was a deliberately bad plan, although I obviously can't prove that. But because of this, I don't think we should be surprised by some of the weird COVID swells that we see after vaccination begins in some countries like this country, which is Colombia, or in other countries like India. And again, let me be very clear, this is not an anti-vaccination video. And the vaccines might be perfectly fine, although there are some signs that some of them are not. If you are suspicious of the vaccines, I am somewhat also suspicious of certain vaccines, but nothing would need to be wrong with any of the vaccines. They could all be working just fine, and you could still see COVID swells just based on the vaccination process. The vaccination process itself could be dangerous. So I'm not telling people not to get vaccinated. I'm telling them consider vaccination conditions. Okay, they could be dangerous. Now, why does this matter? This matters partly because if you do get infected at the vaccination site, your symptoms will emerge within 13.5 days. Or if you have Delta, it could emerge. It will almost inevitably emerge before 11.5 days. And your little jab card isn't really valid as a jab card, as a vaccination certificate for 14 days, as far as I know, anywhere in the world, as far as I know. That means that if you get sick at the vaccination site, and then you go and you get diagnosed, and they're going to say, when did your symptoms emerge? They're going to diagnose you as an unvaccinated COVID case for getting COVID for trying to get vaccinated, and that's weird. That's really weird if you think about it, because if there were no vaccines and just a vaccination process, and there are vaccines, the side effects tell us that something is being injected. But if there were no vaccines, the vaccination process would still work. It would still appear to be working in places like the United States, for example, because all the officials would have to do is expose a large number of people to COVID risk, and then sort them into two groups according to whether or not they are sick 2 weeks later. The group that is not sick are vaccinated, and the group that are sick are unvaccinated. So I have checked to see how many people hospitalized as unvaccinated actually have jab cards, and the information seems not to be getting collected, not being published, although I assume that somebody somewhere is, probably contrary to the instructions of their superiors, collecting it and preparing to publish it. I'm very eager to see that, but it actually might never happen. But in the meantime, I want to ask you as a viewer, what percentage of hospitalized unvaccinated people with jab cards would be enough to persuade you there's a problem, regardless of mechanism, regardless of whether it's the vaccine, which I admit it might not be, or some other thing? What percentage of people in hospitals who are diagnosed with COVID and unvaccinated officially actually have a jab card would convince you that there is some kind of problem with the vaccination process itself? If it were more than 50%, that would statistically indicate that trying to get vaccinated is probably more than half of the current COVID problem.